Hey everybody, this is a piece, and for me it's the last piece that I'm going to be reading from this book, because it's it's the only one I haven't read yet. But this is from the Trotsky Reappraisal, edited by Terry Brotherstone and Paul Dukes, and the piece is titled Stalin and Trotsky's Relatives in Russia by Valery Bronstein. In the spring of 1879, the family of David Leontievich Bronstein, which consisted of his wife Annetta and two children, 9-year-old Alexander and 5-year-old Elizaveta, were living in the village of Yanokva, near the city of Kherson in Odessa province. Wikipedia says, Berezlavka, Ukraine, formerly known as Yanovka and Yanivka, is a village in Kropivnitsky Raion, Kirovohrad Oblast, Ukraine. The village has a population of 139 in 2001. Berezlavka was part of the Vasilyevka village council and belongs to Ketry-Sanivka Hromada, one of the Hromadas of Ukraine. It is the birthplace of Marxist theorist and politician Leon Trotsky, as well as his sister Olga Kameneva. Until the 18th of July 2020, Berezlavka belonged to the Babrinets Raion. The Raion was abolished in July 2020 as part of the administrative reform of Ukraine, which reduced the number of raions of Kirovohrad Oblast to 4. The area of Babrinets Raion was merged into Kropyvnitsky Raion. Wikipedia says Kherson is a port city in southern Ukraine that serves as the administrative center of Kherson Oblast, located by the Black Sea and on the Dnieper River. Kherson is the home to a major shipbuilding industry and is a regional economic center. At the beginning of 2022, its population was estimated at 279,131. From March to November 2022, the city was occupied by Russian forces during their invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian forces recaptured Kherson on the 11th of November 2022. In June 2023, the city was flooded following the Russian destruction of the nearby Kakhovka Dam. Back to the text. In the south of Ukraine, where the father of the family rented several hundred desyatinas of land. A desyatina is a historical Russian unit of land measurement that is approximately equal to 2.7 acres. Back to the text. Here in October 1879, another son was born, Lev, and in 1883, a younger daughter, Olga. Work on the land brought in a certain income which, to be sure, was not particularly large, but was enough to ensure the family a comfortable existence and to enable the children to receive a decent education. The question of Trotsky, the question of Bronstein's children's schooling worried the father greatly. Not having had much education himself, Trotsky's father appreciated rightly that only learning in respectable professions would make it possible for them to look to the future with confidence. Consequently, Trotsky's father spared no expense in the education of his children, and given the restrictions to which Jews were subject in Russia, this expense was considerable. As a rule, Jewish children, after getting their secondary schooling in Russia, went abroad for their higher education. In the event, the eldest son became an agronomist, while Elizaveta qualified as a physician specializing in stomatology. Olga completed the higher courses for women which were available in Russia. It was intended that Lev, Trotsky, should become a mechanical engineer, but to his father's great chagrin, after leaving modern school, he quitted the family home and chose the path of a professional revolutionary. The father took hard his son's departure into the unknown, all the more because Trotsky had shown himself a brilliant student and carried great hopes. Consequently, until 1907, he broke off all contact with his son, and met Trotsky again only in a courtroom to which he and his wife went at the time of the trial of the members of the First Petersburg Soviet of Workers' Deputies. The trial made Trotsky famous, and this reconciled the father to his son to some degree, though it did not bring them closer. In fact, Trotsky never managed to revisit Yanovka, where Trotsky was born and spent his childhood. Trotsky loved the place and frequently mentioned it in conversation. Trotsky remembered Yanovka. Yanovka. What did I say? I hope I was saying it right earlier. I don't think it was. Yanovka. Trotsky loved Yanovka and frequently mentioned it in conversation. Trotsky remembered Yanovka, too, when Trotsky went illegally to Petersburg in 1905, taking Yanovsky as his cover name, and in this way paying tribute to the memory of his birthplace. Trotsky's two daughters from his first marriage, Nina and Zina, were brought up in Yanovka, as were the children of Alexander and Elizaveta. Yanovka was abandoned only when the Civil War began, the last to leave being David Leontievich, who walked 200 kilometers from Kherson to Odessa across devastated country. He later reached his sons Alexander and Lev in Moscow. David Leontievich expressed his opinion concerning the revolution in a well-known sentence, quote, "Fathers work and work so as to provide for their old age, and then their children go and make a revolution," end quote. For a time, Trotsky's father lived with Alexander's family at 10 Bolshoi Gnezdovsky Pereulok. Then he acquired a flat in the Vorobiev Hills district. Trotsky's father died in Moscow in 1922. His wife Annetta had died earlier in 1910 at Yanovka. When I Google this neighborhood in on Wikipedia, it takes me to Sparrow Hills. Sparrow Hills is a hill on the right bank of the Moskva River and one of the highest points in Moscow, reaching a height of 80 meters, 260 feet above the river level. The observation platform is on a steep bank, 85 meters, 279 feet above the river, or 200 meters, 660 feet above sea level. The Central Lenin Stadium, where the opening and closing ceremonies of the 1980 Summer Olympics took place, is right below, across the Moskva River. Next to it is the Novodevichy Convent with its Naryshkin Baroque towers. Not far from the observation platform is the Luzhniki Metro Bridge. The two-level metro bridge traverses the river to link Komsomolsky Prospect with Vernadsky Prospect. It serves two urban transport systems, motor vehicles, and the Moscow Metro subway. The glass-walled subway station, Vorobyovi Gory, is at the lower level of the bridge. The hills, immortalized by many Russian poets and writers, have been named after the village Vorobyovo, which was acquired by Grand Duchess Sophia of Lithuania, Vytautas's only daughter, from the boyars Vorobyovs in 1453. Alexander I of Russia wished to build the Cathedral of Christ the Savior there. His successor had construction work suspended, and the cathedral eventually was erected near the Kremlin. The main landmarks of the hills are the Moscow State University, at one time the tallest building in Europe, and the Trinity Church. Sparrow Hills were renamed Lenin Hills in 1935 after Vladimir Lenin. The historic name was restored in 1999. Back to the text. Trotsky's influence on his family was very great, despite his parents' conservatism and their resistance to his influence. Alexander left home to work for hire as an agronomist. Olga and Alexander's elder son Boris, who was brought up by his grandfather at Yanovka, both chose the path of revolutionary struggle and also left home. However, Trotsky's fate was tragically interwoven with that of all the members of his family. After Trotsky was exiled in 1929, there remained in the USSR 18 of his close relatives and also his first wife, Alexandra Lvovna Sokolovskaya. 11 of them were adults and 8 were children. Practically all were subjected to repressive measures, regardless of sex or age. 7 were shot. Trotsky's son Sergei Sidov, Alexander, Olga, Alexander's elder son Boris Bronstein, Olga's children Alexander and Yuri Kamenev, and also A.L. Sokolovskaya. Matilda Menkes, Alexander's elder daughter, died in a camp, while Lev Bronstein, Alexander's younger son, died in doubtful circumstances just after he had returned to Moscow from a camp. The rest experienced prisons, camps, and exile to the remote parts of the country. The, quote, iron roller, end quote, of repression rolled over the member of Lev Davidovich's family. I think it's supposed to say members, maybe I'm wrong. Crushing not only his relatives in the first and second generations, but also those in the third. The children of Trotsky's younger daughter, Nina, Lev and Valina Nevelson, disappeared without trace. His granddaughter, Alexandra Molina, his eldest daughter, Zina, and Alexander Davidovich's grandson, through his son Boris, Valery Bronstein, experienced prison and exile. Who were these people? Relatives of Lev Davidovich Trotsky, or persons who constituted a danger to the or persons who constituted a danger to the state and were therefore subject to extermination or isolation. Of them all, only 3 engaged in political activity during their lives: Alexandra Lvovna Sokolovskaya, Trotsky's first wife; Olga Davidovna Kameneva, his younger sister; and his nephew Boris Alexandrovich Bronstein, the elder son of his brother Alexander. The rest of his relatives were remote from politics and never took part in political activity. Alexandra Lvovna Sokolovskaya, party cover name Vonskaya, who was Lev Davidich's first wife, and may be considered his first instructor in the foundations of Marxism when he was living in Nikolaev, was born in 1872. Together with Trotsky, she joined the South Russia Workers' Union in southern Ukraine and upheld Marxist views within it. After the destruction of the Union and the arrest of its members in 1898, in Butyrki transit prison in Moscow, on the way to exile, she married Lev Bronstein. Wikipedia says Butyrka prison, usually known simply as Butyrka, is a prison in the Tverskoy district of central Moscow, Russia. In Imperial Russia, Butyrka served as the central transit prison. During the Soviet Union era, 1917 to 1991, Butyrka held many political prisoners. As of 2022, Butyrka remains the largest of Moscow's remand prisons. Overcrowding is an ongoing problem. Back to the text. Trotsky's first wife, Alexandra, went into exile with him at Ust-Kut. Wikipedia says Ust-Kut is a town and the administrative center of Ust-Kutsky district in Irkutsk Oblast, Russia, located 961 kilometers, 597 miles from Irkutsk, the administrative center of the oblast, located on a western loop of the Lena River. The town spreads out for over 20 kilometers, 12 miles along the left bank, near the point where the Kuta River joins with the west. Population 45,375, according to the 2010 census. Back to the text. After Trotsky's wife, Alexandra, had become the mother of his 2 daughters, Zina and Nina, she approved of his plan to escape from exile and helped to carry it out. She then sent the children to her husband's parents and devoted herself completely to revolutionary activity. She was arrested more than once by the Tsar's secret police. In the Soviet period, she supported Trotsky's ideas and worked actively in the Leningrad Party organization. After the death in 1928 of Alexandra's daughter Nina, she brought up Nina's children, Lev and Valina Nevelson. Although Alexandra's marriage with Trotsky broke up in 1902, she maintained friendly relations with him and his new wife, Natalia Ivanovna Sedova, who lived from 1882 to 1962. Alexandra, after the destruction of the, where am I? Alexandra was arrested in Leningrad in 1935 and exiled in Siberia. In 1937, she was again arrested, and by sentence of the Military Collegium of the USSR Supreme Court, Alexandra was shot in 1938. Alexandra's grandchildren, through her younger daughter Nina Lvovna Bronstein, Lev, born 1921, and Volina, 1925, Nevelson, were brought up after her arrest by her sister in the Ukraine, and their subsequent fate is unknown. The first and second husbands of her elder daughter Zinaida, Zakhar Moglin, and Platon Volkov, and also the husband of her younger daughter Nina, were also shot. Both Trotsky's daughters loved their fathers very much and were fanatically devoted to his ideas. Zinaida Lvovna Bronstein, by marriage Volkova, his elder daughter, and a teacher by profession, followed her father abroad in 1930. In 1932, Zinaida was deprived, along with her father, of Soviet citizenship, having gone to Berlin in order to be treated for tuberculosis, of which disease her sister had died. On the 11th of January 1933, threatened with expulsion from the country and suffering from deep depression, she killed herself. Her son, Vsevolod Esteban Platonovich Volkov, born 1926, was taken abroad with her and was in Berlin when she died. Following his mother's death, Esteban, or Vsevolod, went to live with Trotsky's elder son by his second marriage, Lev Lvovich Sedov, died in Paris 1938, who had no children of his own, and after Sedov's death, he went to his grandfather in Mexico, where he is now living. He has 4 daughters, Veronica, Nora, Natalia, Patricia, and 2 grandchildren. Alexandra Zakharovna Moglina, married name Baklova, the daughter of Zinaida Lvovna and Zakhar Moglin, was born in 1923 and remained in the USSR. Until her mother went abroad, she lived with the Volkovs, and thereafter with her father. After his arrest, she was brought up by Moglin's second wife. In 1949, she was arrested under Article 735 of the RSFSR Criminal Code as a socially dangerous element, and as Trotsky's granddaughter was exiled to Kazakhstan, where she remained until rehabilitated in 1956. She died in Moscow in 1989. Presently living in Moscow are her daughter Olga Anatolievna Bakhvalova, born 1958, and her grandson, Denis Bakhvalov, born 1983. Sergei Lvovich Sedov, Trotsky's younger son with Natalia Sedova Trotsky, was born in 1908 and, unlike his brother, made himself deliberately remote from politics. As a boy, he practiced gymnastics and dreamt of becoming an athlete and circus performer. But later he was attracted to technology, graduating from Moscow's Higher Technical Institute, MVTI. A talented engineer and the author of several scientific works on thermodynamics and the theory of engines, he became, when still young, a professor at one of the technical colleges in Moscow. He married early and lived apart from his parents in one room of a communal flat. He did not follow his father and brother into exile at Alma-Ata, and he also declined to go abroad, which proved to be a fatal decision. In 1933, he divorced his wife, but they went on living together in one room because there was nowhere else to live. At the beginning of 1935, in connection with the so-called Kremlin case, he was sentenced to 5 years' exile in the Krasnoyarsk territory. the Krasnoyarsk, excuse me. The Krasnoyarsk Krai is a federal subject of Russia located in Siberia. Krasnoyarsk Krai administrative center is the city of Krasnoyarsk, the second largest city in Siberia after Novosibirsk, comprising half of the Siberian Federal District. Krasnoyarsk Krai is the largest krai in Russia, the second largest federal subject in the country after neighboring Sakha, and the third largest country subdivision by area in the world. The krai covers an area of 2,366,797 square kilometers, 913,825 square miles. 913,825 square miles, constituting roughly 13% of Russia's total area. Krasnoyarsk Krai has a population of 2,856,971 as of the 2021 census. Back to the text. In 1937, Trotsky's son, so what was the name again? Sergei Lvovich Sedov, was rearrested, and on the 29th of October he was shot at the age of 29. He was posthumously rehabilitated in 1988. While in exile, S.L. Sedov got married again to Henrietta Rubinstein in 1935, about whose parents or relatives in Russia nothing is known. Of this marriage, a daughter, Yulia, was born in 1936. Yulia Sergeyevna Sedova, married name Axelrod, now lives in the USA, and her son David and 3 small grandchildren live in Israel. Her mother, H.M. Rubinstein, served 10 years imprisonment and subsequent exile and died in 1987 in Tallinn. Or Tallinn, Tallin. It says that Tallinn is the capital of Estonia and a cultural hub in Northern Europe. Alexander Davidovich Bronstein, Trotsky's elder brother, was born in 1870. Alexander Davidovich Bronstein attended the gymnasium in Omsk and went to university in Switzerland. Alexander Davidovich Bronstein spent his whole life working as a cattle breeder and agronomist in various sugar works. Although not indifferent to his brother's ideas, Alexander Davidovich Bronstein was by nature remote from politics and did not engage in revolutionary activity. For this reason, apparently, Alexander Davidovich Bronstein did not object when his elder son Boris became attracted to Marxism and left home. During the revolution and the civil war which followed, Alexander Davidovich Bronstein and his family, fleeing from the whites, managed to get away from his birthplace and moved to Moscow for a time, 1918 to 1920. When the fighting was over, Alexander Davidovich Bronstein returned home and continued his work in sugar-making enterprises. Alexander Davidovich Bronstein's last employment was a manager of a farm, a fattening center belonging to the Deryuginsk Sugar Works in Kursk region. Here, in March 1937, Alexander Davidovich Bronstein was arrested, and after a brief period in Kursk prison, Alexander Davidovich Bronstein was sent to Moscow. Alexander Davidovich Bronstein's case was examined by the Military Collegium of the USSR Supreme Court, and on the basis of 58.6, 58.8, and 58.11 of the RSFSR Criminal Code, quote, for maintaining connections with his brother Trotsky and Trotsky's son Sedov, for contact with the spy Blair, and for anti-Soviet activity at the Deryuginsk Fattening Center, expressed in sympathy with the participants. Since executed in the Trotskyist Zinoviev Center, end quote. He was sentenced, Alexander Davidovich Trotsky, was sentenced to be shot. The sentence was carried out on the same day, the 25th of April, 1938. The elder son of Alexander Davidovich, Boris Alexandrovich Bronstein, was closely connected with Trotsky, not only through family ties, but also through his ideas and career. Born at Yanovka in 1897, Trotsky's nephew Boris attended the gymnasium in Nikolaev, from which Boris was expelled in 1912 for active participation in a May Day demonstration and other, quote, illegal acts. In the same year, Boris Bronstein went abroad to join Trotsky, with whom he spent 2 years. In 1914, Trotsky's nephew Boris returned to Russia, quote, to work among the masses, end quote, joining the Bolshevik wing of the RSDLP in Ekaterinslav. In 1916, Trotsky's nephew Boris was working for the party among the soldiers. Trotsky's nephew Boris helped to form Red Guard units in the Ukraine, where he fought against the Haidamaks. Haidamaks, according to Wikipedia, were Ukrainian Cossack paramilitary outfits composed of commoners, peasants, craftsmen, and impoverished noblemen in the eastern part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. They were formed in reaction to the Commonwealth's actions that were directed to reconstitute its orders, or territory of Right Bank Ukraine, which was secured following ratification of the Treaty of Perpetual Peace with the Tsardom of Russia in 1710. During the Civil War, back to the text, during the Civil War, Trotsky's nephew, Boris, was a member of the Supreme Military Inspectorate and also a military commissar with engineer forces, motor car units, artillery, and supply organizations on the eastern and later on the southern and western fronts. In 1920, he was appointed deputy chairman of the Extraordinary Plenipotentiary Council of Labor and Defense, which was headed by Trotsky. Trotsky's nephew Boris also served as office manager of the People's Commissariat of Foreign Affairs, 1921, and military attaché in Austria, 1925. Trotsky's nephew Boris kept up an illegal connection with Trotsky after Trotsky's expulsion from the party, until Boris's uncle was deported. Arrested in May 1937 and condemned by the military collegium under Article 58.7, 58.8, and 58.11 for having, quote, as a relative of Trotsky's, become a member of an anti-Soviet organization in the First Civil Air Fleet, end quote. Trotsky's nephew Boris was shot in October 1937 along with Sergei Sedov. He was posthumously rehabilitated in 1956. Boris's wife, Rufina Vasilyevna Kepanova Bronstein, sentenced to 17 years imprisonment and was rehabilitated in 1956 and died in Moscow in 1975. Alexander Davidovich's other children, he had 4, experienced camps and exile. The younger of Alexander Davidovich, Trotsky's older brother's sons, Lev Alexandrovich Bronstein, was a documentary cameraman at Mosfilm Studios. After spending 10 years in the Vorkuta camps, Alexander's son, Lev, died suddenly 2 days after his return to Moscow in 1947. The cause of his death is not known. The eldest daughter of Trotsky's older brother, Alexander, Matilda Alexandrovna Bronstein, married name Menkes, died in a camp. She was married to one of the heads of the TASS, who was also shot. Alexander, Trotsky's older brother's two younger daughters, Evgenia and Anna, were also subjected to repressive measures of one kind or another. Only one of them is still living, Anna Alexandrovna Kosatikova, born 1912, resident in Moscow. Boris Alexandrovich, Trotsky's son, Trotsky's nephew's son, Valery Borisovich Bronstein, is the author of this piece. Trotsky's great-nephew, though only one of the surviving men of the family who lives in Russia, was born in 1924. After the arrest of his father Boris, and then of after the arrest of Valery's father Boris, and then of Valery's mother, Boris was sent to a children's home. Shit, I keep fucking mixing this up. Boris Alexandrovich's son, Valery Borisovich Bronstein, Trotsky's great-nephew, the only one of the surviving men of the family who lives in Russia, was born in 1924. After the arrest of Valery's father, and then of Valery's mother, Valery was sent to a children's home. Later, Valery Bronstein was brought up by his grandmother, the mother of Arvi Kepanova Bronstein. Valery Bronstein served in the war against fascist Germany in 1942 to 45 and was awarded 12 decorations by the government. In 1948, Valery Bronstein was arrested and put in the Lubyanka internal prison until sentenced to exile by the Special Board under Article 735, quote, as Trotsky's grandson and the son of an enemy of the people, end quote. Valery Bronstein was sent to Kolyma, where he remained until 1958. Valery now lives in Moscow, where he works, in accordance with his qualifications, as a geologist and geophysicist in one of the organizations of the USSR Ministry of Geology. Valery Bronstein has a daughter, Elena Valerevna Bronstein, married name Kudasheva, born in 1956. And in 1979, he became a grandfather. With the birth of Maxim Kudashev, they also live in Moscow. Elizaveta Davidovna Bronstein Meilman, Trotsky's elder sister, was born in 1875. By profession, Elizaveta was a physician specializing in stomatology. What the hell is stomatology? Stomatology is the medical science that studies and treats diseases of the mouth and oral mucous membranes. In 1898, Elizaveta married a doctor, Naum Meilman, and thereafter lived in Nikolaev. Elizaveta did not engage in political activity. Trotsky's sister, Elizaveta, in 1900, had a son named Lev. In 1924, Elizaveta Bronstein, Trotsky's sister, died from an illness in the Crimea and was followed in 1934 by her husband. Elizaveta Bronstein, Trotsky's sister, had a son. His name was Lev Naumovich Meilman. Trotsky's nephew, Lev, was quite a well-known architect, the author of the project for the aquatic sports stadium in Leningradsky Prospect in Moscow. Trotsky's nephew, Lev Meilman, was arrested, spent some time in prison, and after his release was sent to reside compulsorily in Kazakhstan, in Balkhash, where he died in 1960. Lev Malman had no children. Olga Davidovna Bronstein Kameneva, Trotsky's younger and favorite sister, was born at Yanovka in 1883. As a student following the higher courses for women, Olga Bronstein was active in revolutionary work and was consequently arrested. In 1905, Olga Bronstein joined the party and married the well-known Bolshevik L.B. Kamenev. In the Soviet period, Olga Kamenev held a number of leading posts in state and public organizations, carrying on cultural and educational work. Is this like the Kamenev, or is it a different Kamenev? No, it's the Kamenev. In the Soviet period, Olga Kameneva held a number of leading posts in state and public organizations, carrying on cultural and educational work. Olga Kamenev's last appointment was as chair of the All-Union Society for Cultural Relations with Foreign Countries. In 1927, Olga Kameneva publicly denounced her brother's activity and repudiated Trotsky's ideas, and later those of her husband. Olga Kameneva told her relatives that ideological differences with her husband were the reason why she divorced him. Nevertheless, Olga Kameneva was arrested in 1935, and 6 years later, in the autumn of 1941, she was shot. Alexander Lyutik Lvovich Kamenev, her elder son, was born in 1907, and her other son, Yuri, was born in 1916. Alexander, a test pilot by profession, was very remote from politics. Yuri was still a student when they were both arrested in 1936 and shot in the same year. Left alive and not subject to repressive measures were Alexander's wife, Galina Kravchenko, a well-known film actress in her day, and their son, Vitaly. Well, she is a beautiful woman, that's for sure. Anyway. Alexander's wife, Galina Kravchenko, a well-known film actress in her day, and their son, Vitaly. This was due to a rapid remarriage of Galina Kravchenko and the adoption of Vitaly by her new husband. Vitaly worked as a scriptwriter for Mosfilm, fell gravely ill, and committed suicide at the beginning of 1970. Thus, a substantial section not only of the close, but also the more distant relatives of Trotsky were killed, and practically all were victims of repressive measures. Their fate confirmed the prophecy uttered by G.L. Pyatakov when he said to Lev Davidovich after a session of the Politburo in 1926, quote, "He, Stalin, will never forgive you for that. Neither you nor your children nor your grandchildren," end quote. The reference was to Trotsky's statement at the Politburo session that Stalin had finally presented his candidacy for the role of, quote, gravedigger, end quote, of the party in the revolution, end quote. It did not confirm Trotsky's own prognosis, quote, "Blows against persons close to me in Russia cannot give him, Stalin, the necessary, quote, satisfaction," end quote. And at the same time, they cause serious political inconveniences, end quote. Trotsky. Trotsky had, after all, underestimated certain features of Stalin's character. Quote, "The greatest delight is to mark one's enemy, prepare everything, avenge oneself thoroughly, and then go to sleep, end quote. That's the end of the piece. There's a chart here that is like a Trotsky family tree that I'm not going to read, and then a list of 35 of his relatives, and I'm not going to read all of that because it's probably covered in the text that I just read, the most important ones, and I don't think these also descriptions don't tell us very much. They just say names and birth and death dates. So thank you so much for listening. I actually found that super interesting. I knew that the extent of the murder of Trotsky's family was large, but I didn't realize quite this large. So thank you for listening.